Deirdre, to study consciousness, one approach is to look at altered states of consciousness. And the most important one we have is when we dream. So what is it about the consciousness of dreaming that can help us understand what is the consciousness of waking?
Well, I think it's one of the easiest ways we can see what brain areas are doing what. I mean, there's obviously other waking research that elucidates this, but the prefrontal areas being so much less active in dreams seems to have a lot to do with not questioning bizarre events in dreams the way we would if they happened awake.
Let's start by characterizing dreams. So if I asked you, what are the primary characteristics of dreams as a state of consciousness, what would you tell me?
They're much more visual. I mean, that's our primary sensory mode awake, but we're using others quite a bit too. And it's just the overwhelmingly dominant one in dreams, and sometimes our imagery is even more vivid than awake.
Okay.
Somewhat more emotional in dreams, but that's more variable, somewhat more motor sensations in dreams than most other senses damped down. Mm-hmm. Relatively little language in most dreams, although that's variable, but in most of our dreams, it's almost like we're an entity that can't talk, although poetry can come in dreams also. And then most of our most abstract thinking, and especially our censorship, not just in the Freudian sense of, oh, that's not socially appropriate, but also, oh, that's not the correct way to approach this problem. All that is much damped down in dreams.
So therefore, all that's why we have all these bizarre things that are happening, and we're not bothered by it. We fly, we do things that are physically impossible.
We don't
socially
question,
inappropriate.
Oh my God, there's a 5-foot pink bird in the room. Just, oh, it's pretty.
Yeah, and that's directly related to the biology of the frontal lobes, which are inhibitory, which control our executive function being shut down, mm-hmm. Right? So, but by seeing what this altered state of consciousness is in a dream, how does that help us understand the components of natural consciousness when we have multiple modes of sensation, when we have the frontal lobes back in working order? How do we see the composite of consciousness? Because people think that consciousness is a simple unitary thing, but we see here, because of dreams, that it's not.
Yes, and I mean, essentially, it will attach itself to whatever is active at the time. I mean, we can move into consciously identifying with this, can't speak, very emotional person having these bizarre visual experiences. If that's what our brain is doing at the time, that's where our consciousness, I am that. Our conscious self-identification is not nearly as consistent as we think of it, but is really whatever is going on in our brain, no matter how atypical.
When we think of the times when we're dreaming, do we feel any less the same person we are? I'm not sure we do. I think we feel just as conscious, even though we don't have some of the functions of consciousness. The feelings that we have are.
I think we do within the dream.
Within the dream.
When they wake up, some people completely identify with their dreaming self when looking at it in retrospect, and other people sort of have but I'd never do that, or they're not disturbed by things other dream characters do, even though actually our brains created that, but they can be quite disturbed, and this sort of sense of ego alien to things that the identified dream self is doing. So that varies a lot. But yeah, within the dream, I agree with you. I think that pretty much, one always identifies with the
So within the dream, we have the sense of our own personality, our own self, our own consciousness to the same degree that we have it waking, even though it's so bizarre. We don't know it's bizarre because our functions are damped down, as you've said. And that sort of suggests that some of the things we think about consciousness, that what I need to be conscious, is not necessarily the case, that consciousness can exist in a much more rudimentary form.
Right. And then there's a kind of dream called lucid dream where you know you're dreaming while you're dreaming. And I mean, a few philosophers have argued that that's the only time you're conscious in a dream is when you say this is a dream. But I'd say that's just the only time you're accurate about your state. But I would call all of our dream experience, when we're experiencing a self that's having experiences, I'd say we're conscious, albeit in this alternate form in dreams. But still, lucid dreams are a very distinctive kind of consciousness.
So you've had lucid dreams.
Yes, yeah, and I've done research studies on lots of people.
So tell me one example of a lucid dream that you feel is appropriate to tell me. I don't want to ask anything too sensitive.
They vary all over the place. I mean, the mundane ones are as interesting as I've had dramatic transcendent ones, but other times I'll just be dreaming a completely ordinary dream and I'll realize it's a dream. And then, I mean, if
like what, going to the store, buying some milk?
If this were a dream, I would be like, that's amazing. This looks like real leather. And and my dress has this flower pattern that's just like one I actually own. And it's just, and you look so realistic, like a real human being. And I might be trying to tell you that you're a dream character.
Right.
To see if you would tell me about what being a dream, just any mundane detail that's already there becomes
you
fascinating.
have a critical factor.
Becomes fascinating if you know that it has no physical reality and your mind is creating this. I find it a very, very transcendent experience, even when it's in the context of a completely ordinary dream where I end up examining that the wood table really has realistic grain. I think they do tend to correlate with sort of peak experiences, like people will often realize they're dreaming because they can fly. Although sometimes it's they realize they're dreaming and then they remember that flying is something they like to do. So often they're beautiful or profound things going on, or sometimes it's a even more bizarre than usual thing in a dream that triggers the realization.
When you're dreaming lucidly, do you have a stronger sense of your own consciousness in a dream?
Usually. Although one of the studies that I did on lucid dreams was called Just How Lucid Are Lucid Dreams. And I tested some, what I called corollaries of lucidity, like the people in dreams are not real people, they're dream characters. You don't have to obey the law of physics. You're not going to be able to bring objects back when you wake up. Things like that. And I found that for anyone, people were lucid about half the time once they'd identified that they were dreaming, but and way less than a quarter of the time for all of them. So you had people knowing it was a dream, and yet, like saying to you, this is a dream. When we wake up, we've got to compare notes. We can prove we were both sharing this dream because, I'll remember what you said. Or they'll still be looking for a way out of a locked room instead of just kind of walking through the wall. Or again, like trying to bring back some proof. Okay, I'll bring this dream world thing and that will prove that I was having this lucid dream. The prefrontal area is still usually not firing as actively as when you're awake, even if it has managed to identify that it's a dream. So you get a mixture of your usual functions. But again, I think it's very illuminating to see how any subcluster of these can exist without the rest of them.